Hello everyone, welcome to the Gate Academy. Welcome to another important session of Gate Vantage series. In today's topic, we will be learning design against fluctuating load. Now, if I will say that why we design against fluctuating load, why designing against fluctuating load is very important. So you should be understanding that as far as number of failures are concerned in our environment, most of them are under this fluctuating load itself. Therefore, the fluctuating load becomes very important. Now, in order to understand what is fluctuating load and how we have to design corresponding to that, we should first of all understand that what is static load. How do we define static load? Okay, and then we will step by step come into this design against fluctuating load. We will watch that in how many number of ways the gate asks the question from this particular topic. Fine. So first of all, let us define static load. So if I am saying a static load is there, then static load should have applied gradually. Static load, the definition of the static load says that it should be applied gradually first of all, and once it is applied, it should not change its value with time. Now, if I am saying that it remains constant with time, then by that what I mean? I mean that neither the magnitude should change, nor the direction should change, and neither the point of application of the load should change. If any of these three will change, then ultimately it will result into a fluctuating load. How these things will result into fluctuating load, we will see that when we will come into the definition of fluctuating load. But right now, as far as static load is concerned, this is the only definition which is completely defining the static load. Fine. Now, the point is whether it is a load which is cause of failure or it is something else. So it is always your stress which is cause of failure. Stress which is cause of failure. Basically, the internal force per unit area, the intensity of the internal force at particular point will decide that whether that particular point will sustain or not. Fine. Therefore, the stress definition becomes very important. A way of obtaining the stress is force per unit area, which is force applied upon area. But the point is how we define stress. So it is the intensity of internal force. And how do we define it? Internal resisting force per unit area. So this is something which is defined only with respect to the internal force. However, with the help of free body diagram, you can say that internal force and the external force on a particular body, like in this particular case, is going to be same. Therefore, you can use, as far as magnitude is concerned, you can use this F as well. But the point is, how do we define stress? So it always dependent upon the internal force. Okay. Now this equation is called as elementary equation. This is something which we have learned in our strength of material, mechanics of solid. Moving further, how do we define strength? Strength, if someone will tell me that, many of you might be telling that, okay, the strength is something load carrying capacity. Okay, but the load carrying capacity is decided upon the fact that how much stress has been generated on the body and what is the maximum value of that stress that can sustain by that body, by each and every element of the body, by any of the element of the body. So it is the maximum value of stress that is defined as strength. If your stress and at any particular point on the body, throughout the body, is less than that of strength, then definitely the body is going to survive that load, or else the body will fail. Okay, so that is how we define strength. Strength, it is the maximum value of stress that a material can withstand. Now if we want to understand that, okay, under this loading condition, say for example this piece has been applied. Now under this loading condition, whether the body will fail or not. So with the help of our elementary equation, we will find sigma max. Basically here it will be sigma 2. Here it will be sigma 2, which will be P upon A. And if I am not right, if I am not wrong, then this A is basically A minimum. With the help of that only, we used to calculate the sigma. Now this sigma is called as nominal stress. Nominal stress as far as design is concerned. Why nominal? What is the meaning of nominal? Nominal means only by name. Only by name, if you want to determine that, okay, what is the maximum value of stress, then it is P by A minimum. But in actual, if we want to decide that what is the actual amount of stress at any point on this body, the maximum value of stress at any point on this whole body is how much, then it is not your sigma 2. It is something different from sigma 2. If I want to write the relation, then the relation will be sigma max will be equal to kf into sigma 2. Now this kf is always greater than equal to 1. This kf is always greater than equal to 1. This kf is called as fatigue stress concentration factor. This is something which you have to just listen, and once we will proceed then you will be able to understand. But right now what I am saying is it is not the sigma 2 corresponding to which we are going to design, because it is not a sigma 2 which is maximum stress in the component. It is sigma max which is calculated with the help of this factor, and this factor is called fatigue stress concentration factor, and this fatigue stress concentration factor is always greater than equal to 1. So basically if you have calculated some sigma at a minimum cross sectional area, still you haven't reached to the maximum value of stress. Why you haven't reached to your maximum value of stress, that we are going to see next. It is your stress concentration. What is stress concentration? We should understand that as far as stress is concerned, we can have this analogy with the fluid, that there are stress flow lines. Say for example these are stress flow lines. Okay, now if this stress flow lines is uniformly distributed, so you can say directly that okay, whatever stress this point will be having the same stress, other points will also have the stresses at all the points will be same if the density of these stress flow lines are same. But if you will start finding, if you will start observing, then you can say that okay, say this is section 1, section 2. As far as our elementary equation is concerned, at section 2 sigma must be greater, sigma 2 must be greater than sigma 1. This is straight away you can say just by using the elementary equation, because here the area is less, definitely the density of the stress flow line is going to be more. Definitely the sigma 2 is going to be greater than sigma 1. But the density of this stress flow line, is it uniform throughout this minimum cross section area or is it not? That is the point. If you will observe carefully, then you will find that okay, near the discontinuity the density is greater in comparison to what? The area which is farther. Okay, this is something which you should be able to understand. If in case like this case still the density is uniformly distributed, the stress flow line is uniformly distributed, sigma 2 is definitely greater than sigma 1, but throughout the section the stress should be same. But that is not the case. That is not the case. In real, what happens? In real, at section 2 near the discontinuity the stress flow lines have greater density. Okay, and from there you define one more stress which is sigma 3, which is sigma 3. So ideally if you haven't considered the stress concentration factor, then at section 1 sigma 1 will be there, at section 2 sigma 2 will be there, if there is no stress concentration factor taken into consideration. But once you will take care of this stress concentration factor, then you will find that instead of this sigma 2, which we have assumed that it is uniformly distributed, instead of this sigma 2 it is sigma 3 which is the maximum amount of stress, and it is founded near the discontinuity. Here in this case this is the discontinuity in our component, therefore the stress near the discontinuity is sigma 3, and the distribution is not uniform. As you will move further from the discontinuity, the amount of stress is going to reduce. So from here you can say that okay, this is sigma 3 greater than sigma 2 is greater than sigma 1. So basically while designing we cannot go with sigma 2, we have to consider sigma 3 as well. Fine, moving further, if I will say that how do we get this sigma 3? So sigma 3 we get with the help of stress concentration factor, and this stress concentration factor is called as theoretical stress concentration factor. Why theoretical stress concentration factor? That I will come. It is represented by Kt. I haven't yet reached to my maximum stress yet. Okay, this is something we can say that we are in the way in finding the actual stress which is generated in the component, actual maximum stress which is generated in the component. Fine, so this is our one of the step. So Kt basically we have calculated, and Kt is termed as theoretical stress concentration factor. Now if someone will ask from me that what is theoretical stress concentration factor? So it is the highest value of stress near discontinuity upon the nominal stress obtained by the elementary equation. Means ideally, if I am not considering material, if I am not considering the properties of material, if I am just considering the geometry, then I can say sigma 3 upon sigma 2. Say in this particular case, I haven't considered anything about what this material is, whether it is ductile, brittle, whether it is having the coarse granular structure or fine granular structure. I haven't considered anything, and I have just represented this mathematical model. Okay, and I have come to this point. Okay, there must be some sigma 3 near the discontinuity, there must be some sigma 2 average value. Then corresponding to that, in this particular case, we can say that this will be equal to sigma 3 by sigma 2. Still this sigma 3 which we are saying that we have found it to be greater than sigma 2, still this is not the actual value of maximum stress which we should be getting corresponding to any component of a particular material. Fine. So yet we haven't taken consideration of the fact that the materials could be different from each other, and correspondingly the stress concentration will be different in each other in other components. Fine. Let us just see here. This is the way of how we determine this theoretical stress concentration factor. So this K is basically Kt. Here you can find that okay, a hole is there, circular hole is there, having some dimensions. Say diameter is 2r, and the load is applied like this. Width is this much, T is this much. Now corresponding to the ratio of D by W, we will be getting some different values of Kt. Fine. Here we haven't talked about that whether this component is made up of a particular material or not. Here I am just simply saying that if the ratio of D by 2r or 2r by W is say 0.3, okay, or say 0.5, if 2r by W is equal to 0.5, then from here straight away you can find that okay, with the help of this graph I can say that the stress concentration will be something 2.1, something like 2.1. But I haven't said that whether this material is made up of aluminum or steel or bronze or what. Okay, I haven't considered that. So because I haven't considered anything, so this is something which is general. First of all, we should be applying using the geometry into the consideration, and then corresponding to material we should be knowing that as far as this Kt is provided for this particular geometry and something is provided for the material, we can ultimately reach to our Kf. Fine. Now like that we can go for the other graphs as well. Here you can see this rod having different dimension, under torsion, rod under moment, there is irregularity. These geometries are basically deciding that what will be the value of Kt, and therefore this Kt is called as theoretical stress concentration factor. Apart from these graphs, one more mathematical relation is there which is very famous and which is important as well. Say this is P, elliptical hole is there in your bar, and you want to calculate the value of Kt. So mathematically it was found that Kt is equal to 1 plus 2a by b. Now what is this a, what is this b? Is it always mandatory to have the semi axis on the top and the major axis, semi minor axis on the top, or minor axis on the top and major axis on the bottom, minor axis in the numerator and major axis in the denominator? Is it always mandatory to have? No. It will depend upon the loading. If the loading is there, then you have to see that okay, the dimension which is perpendicular, the axis which is basically perpendicular to the load will be taken into the numerator, and the axis which is parallel to the load, that will be taken into the denominator. Fine. So Kt is equal to 1 plus 2a by b. Kt could also have been equal to 1 plus 2b by a, provided the load is in this direction. So you should understand that this is not minor upon major or major upon minor. This is only perpendicular upon parallel. Fine. So this formula is there. So if I will be asking from you that okay, instead of this elliptical hole I am having some circular hole, then what will the value of Kt? So this Kt will come out to be 1 plus 2, which is equal to 3. But this kT is not always equal to 3 for a circular hole. This is something which we should understand. There is also the limitation of circular hole is there, but still the ratio of the d by w will decide that whether the kT will be 3 or not. If the circular hole is of very small dia, then in that case we can straight away say, okay, the 2r by w seems like 2r by w seems like it is of value 0. 2r is very less in comparison to w. Then in that case we can get the value of kT to be 3. Okay, so this is another assumption which we should be keeping in mind. After all this theoretical values, after all these already derived values, we have to understand that this is something which completely based on mathematics, which is completely based on experiments. So stress concentration charts are based on either photoelastic analysis, which was applied on epoxy model. Okay, no real material was used, epoxy model was used, using circular polariscope or theoretical or finite element analysis of mathematical model. So basically we are talking about mathematical model, basically we are talking about epoxy material, we are not talking about steel, we are not talking about aluminum. So how we are going to determine that what the stress concentration will be there in stress in actual steel or in actual aluminum? In order to get that, we need to know that what is the material property corresponding to these irregularities. If material is highly sensitive to these irregularities, then the stress concentration is going to be maximum, which is kT. If material is not highly sensitive to this irregularities, material do not care about whether there is any irregularity or not, then in that case your stress concentration will be equal to 1. Okay, your sensitivity to the notch is 0. Therefore we have to define one more important term, which is notch sensitivity. Notch sensitivity. Q. And what is this? Increase in actual stress over nominal stress upon increase in theoretical stress over nominal stress. How do we determine increase in actual stress over the nominal stress? With the help of experiments once again, but to the specific material. Okay, now we will be using specific material under the loading condition. And it was observed that the actual materials do not show that much of stress raise due to stress concentration. Fine. So there we have to determine, there we have to tell another term, Kf, which is fatigue stress concentration factor, and this is defined as endurance limit. In terms of endurance limit, what is endurance limit we will come to know once we will get into the dynamic loading. But right now, how do we define Kf? Kf is defined as endurance limit of notch free specimen upon endurance limit of notch specimen. Upon endurance limit of notch specimen. Basically, under the possibility of having some notches, how the stress being raised, and corresponding to that how the strength of the material decreases. With the help of that only we are finding this Kf. Right now just try to understand this, that this Kf is the actual stress concentration factor which will be provided in order to get the actual stress raise for a particular material. If I will talk about Kt, so Kt was completely mathematical. Independent of material. However, Kf is something which is material dependent. Okay, if I will say that this Kt was, so Kt was generalized. Kt was, if D is same, if W is same, then Kt is going to be same. But this is material specific. Kf is material specific. So this is something which you should be able to understand. So if sigma naught is the stress, nominal stress, which we have calculated with the help of elementary equation, then in that case we can say the maximum stress in the material is Kf into sigma naught. However, if sigma naught was the elementary, if sigma naught was your nominal stress using elementary equation at the minimum cross section area, then theoretically the stress rate should be Kt into sigma naught. But actually it was found that Kf into sigma naught is the increased value. Fine. Now this will completely depend upon the material. Some materials are more sensitive to the notches, some materials are not sensitive to the notches, and therefore accordingly it will be decided that whether there will be a stress raise or not, and if there is stress rise is there, then how much will be the amount of stress rise. Fine. So therefore we have to define this notch sensitivity, and this notch sensitivity was as defined, it is equal to the increase in the actual stress over nominal stress upon increase in the theoretical stress over nominal stress. So from here you can say that this must be equal to Kf into sigma naught minus sigma naught, this is the increase over the nominal stress, okay, upon Kt into sigma naught minus sigma naught. From here you can say that Kf minus 1 upon Kt minus 1, sigma naught get cancelled. On solving further you can say that okay, Kf must be equal to 1 plus Q into Kt minus 1. This is the relation which you should keep in mind. And if you will observe carefully, then say some material are there which are not at all sensitive to the notches, which do not care that whether there are any notches or not. There could be any possible reason. Grey cast iron, already there are so many notches. With the help of casting, if you are finding it, there are already so many notches that even if there is some notch, it hardly matters to it. Fine. Any reason could be there. So say this Q is there and Q came to be 0. Q is equal to 0 represent that the material is not sensitive to the notches. As simple as that. And if Q is equal to 0, then we can say that okay, Kf will be equal to how much? Kf will be equal to 1. Now in the same way, say some material is there which is highly sensitive to the notches. Highly sensitive means Q will be equal to 1. This represents the notch sensitivity. So if Q is equal to 1, the Kf will be equal to 1 plus Kt minus 1. 1 get cancelled. Kf will become equal to Kt. So basically you should understand that as far as Q is concerned, notch sensitivity is concerned, it will lie between 0 to 1, and as far as Kf is concerned, it will lie between Kt and 1. Of course, either there will be some stress raise or there will be not. If there is stress raise, then Kf will be greater than 1, and if there is no stress raise, then in that case Kf is equal to 1. This is for your understanding, which you have to keep in mind. Apart from that, this formula is also very important. So by now I think you must have understood that this is the Kf which we have to ultimately derive, and this will be provided to you in the problem. Fine, but this is very much important in order to know that whether there is any stress raise or not, and how much is the stress raise. Let us see one example. In terms of theoretical stress concentration factor Kt and fatigue stress concentration factor Kf, the notch sensitivity Q is expressed as, we know that Q is equal to Kf into sigma naught minus sigma naught upon Kt into sigma naught minus sigma naught. Actual upon theoretical. Okay, this is something which you have to keep in mind. So from here you can say that okay, Kf minus 1 upon Kt minus 1. Straight away the B will be your answer. Now the point is, sometimes Kf is basically very specific to the material, but right now we should also take consideration of a broad classification: ductile material and a brittle material under static load and the fluctuating load, and when the stress concentration will be taken into consideration, and when the stress concentration is not going to be taken into consideration. Fine. So this is from this theoretical point of view. Let us talk about ductile material. and say ductile material is under static loading. So whether we should take the stress concentration into consideration or not. The point is whether there will be stress concentration. Of course there will be stress concentration. KT will definitely be there, and KT depends only upon geometry, so definitely there is some stress raise. Fine. But do we consider its effect or not? No, we don't consider its effect for ductile material under static loading. Why? Because of local yielding. Local yielding. Now, what is local yielding? First of all, we should know that what is yielding. Yielding is something which we know. We know that ductile material fails after being yielded. So there is some proper deformation which we can see, which we can observe. Sometimes we say that if that much is the deformation, we are considering it to be failure, or ultimate fracture is considered as a failure. Anything. But the point is, yielding is a property which is shown only by the ductile material. Now what happens? Say for example, in a material, if at some particular point, the stress increased, okay, and because this stress increased by much, and that at that particular point the yielding took place, but this yielding was a very localized yielding. Some deformation took place, and corresponding to that deformation the stresses got redistributed, everything got placed, everything happened, but this yielding took place only in a very small arena, and therefore we can say that because we are unable to watch its effect on a major level, therefore we can say that okay, as far as ductile material is concerned, as far as static loading is concerned, we can neglect the effect of stress concentration, and what is the cause? The cause is local yielding. I think you are understanding that what is local here and what is yielding here. There will be yielding, but in a very small area. Fine. After that, if I will say ductile material under fluctuating load, whether we can still neglect the KT effect? No, here we cannot neglect the KT effect. If someone will say, sir, but still the material is ductile, still there must be some yielding. There is yielding, but the point is, in a static loading, the mechanics of failure, and in fluctuating loading, the mechanics of failure is completely different. Here it is the notches which are major cause of failure. Here, after yielding, after deformation, after the your molecules becomes fibrous, everything happened, after that the failure will take place. Here what will happen? Here some amount of yielding will be there, but after that a sudden fracture will be there. So here yielding plus sudden fracture. Here the material will yield, the component will get fibrous, and after that only the material will fail. So basically what you have to understand is that the whole mechanics changes in the fluctuating failure than in static failure. Therefore we cannot consider the effect of local yielding, or we cannot deny that the stress concentration is there. Fine. Okay. Now as far as brittle material is concerned, whether it is static load or whether we are talking about fluctuating load, in all the cases you have to consider the effect of stress concentration. Fine. So these are the points which were important as far as theory is concerned. Let's move further. Let's define the dynamic load. How do we define dynamic load? The load which changes with time. Now once again, if I am saying that it is changing with time, then by that what I mean? By that I mean that either magnitude is changing, or the direction is changing, or even the point of application of the load is changing. Here it is not the load which is the cause of saying that whether the material is dynamic or not dynamic. Here it is the stress generated in the material. Of course we are completely concerned about the stress itself. Okay. So if I am saying that here the load is changing, directly you can see if the magnitude will change, the stress will increase. If the F will increase, the stress will increase. If the F will decrease, the stress will decrease. If the direction will change, the direction of stress will also change from tension to compression. Everything will be dependent. Now even if the point of application of load is changing. Here what is happening, the body is under rotation, and because the body is under rotation, even if the force is not changing, force direction magnitude remains same, but because of the rotation, the point of application of the load is changing. Then because of this, ultimately the stress which will be generated in any part of the component will keep on changing, and therefore we will say that okay, this particular type of loading is causing the stress which is changing with time, and therefore we are not going to consider this as a static load. This load will be termed as a dynamic load. Fine. So this is something which you have to understand as far as dynamic load is concerned. Moving further, if I will say that okay, in actual, how is the stress vary under the dynamic loading condition? So in actual, the variation of stress is very random. You need your PhD to understand. For a particular, say for example, a particular company is there, okay, they are making some vibrating machine. Now they want to find that okay, how much load this base is taking. What type of load that base is taking? Basically it is a fluctuating load. The machine is under motion, and therefore some fluctuating load is there. Now in actual, what are the variations of the load, what are the variations of the sigma on the material, that we have to find, but that will take ample amount of time. It will take 2 to 3 years in order to determine that okay, this particular type of machine is going to be under this particular type of loading, this particular type of maximum stress, minimum stress, the variation is there. Fine. At particular omega of one of the part of the body, the vibration is like this, stress which is developed in the base is like this. So basically this is time taking approach. Is how what we do, we consider that okay, instead of going for this random and very unpredictable variation, let us go with some simple models. What are simple models? Sinusoidal models. Okay, some sine curves will be there. Of course, here we will be having some sigma maximum, because the sigma is not constant, so we will be having some sigma maximum, sigma minimum, and of course some sigma average will be there. You can say that as sigma mean. Of course, if the mean is provided, then we can consider this to be your amplitude. So these things will be associated with the fluctuating cycle, fluctuating stress cycle. Now depending upon sigma amplitude and sigma mean, sigma minimum, sigma maximum, depending upon that, we are classifying it in more categories. First is your most general category, which is alternating or fluctuating. Here there is no any specification as far as sigma amplitude, sigma minimum, sigma maximum is concerned. Okay, so this is your most general. Sigma amplitude is there, sigma mean is there, sigma maximum is there, sigma minimum is there, everything is there. As far as repeated is concerned, this term you have to keep in mind, repeated. If someone will told straight away that okay, this is the repeated, the body is under repeated stress cycle, then by that you should be understanding that okay, at some point of time the sigma minimum is 0. The sigma minimum basically becomes 0 over here. Okay, now if I will talk about completely reverse, one more classification, completely reverse. Here sigma mean should be 0. Sigma mean should be 0. Whatever amplitude it is having above 0, the same amplitude, the same variable it is having below 0. Its variation above 0 and below 0 is going to be same. So sigma mean came to be 0. Fine. Moving further. The first way in which the question is asked in your GATE exam is terminology. You should be knowing the terminology. Now first of all, what is sigma max? How do we define sigma max? So it is your maximum stress, and by that I mean algebraically maximum value. Algebraically maximum value. Algebraically maximum value of stress. Now what is algebraically maximum value of, what do we understand by algebraically maximum value of stress? Say if I am talking about -5 and 2, which of the two is algebraically greater? Then here we have to find it with the help of this number line. The number line rule will be followed over here. So this is 0, 1, 2. I'm telling you like that you are a 10th standard guy, just because you don't get confused in your exam. Okay, -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. So if your one number lies on the right side of the other number, definitely it is on a number line, definitely it is a greater number. Fine. So basically here algebraically 2 will be greater than -5. Algebraically 2 will be greater than -5. This is something which you have to understand. In the same way, we should also know about sigma minimum. If I will say that what is sigma minimum, so it is algebraically minimum value. If someone will ask that, okay, what is the mean? So you will say sigma max plus sigma minimum by 2. Someone will ask, okay, what is sigma amplitude? Then you will say sigma max minus sigma minimum by 2. The sigma amplitude is also called as variable. It is also called as variable. One more term is defined, which is range. This term you should be knowing this term, which is sigma maximum minus sigma minimum. In question they can say, okay, the sigma minimum is 20 megapascal positive and the range is 100. So you should be understanding that, okay, they are talking about sigma max to be 120. Fine. So these terminologies you should be knowing. Apart from that, stress ratio. So if someone will ask that what is stress ratio, so stress ratio is sigma minimum by sigma maximum, represented by R. However, it should be represented by S, but it represented by R. Fine. Okay. In the same way, last term, which is amplitude ratio, represented by A. How do we define amplitude ratio? Amplitude ratio is sigma amplitude upon sigma mean. These relations you have to keep in mind. This is not difficult. The only thing you have to take from here is your terminologies, your relations. Okay. Now if someone will ask from me that whether we can calculate this A in terms of R directly or not, straight away if someone has told you that, okay, this is the stress ratio, calculate the amplitude ratio. Can we straight away calculate it or not? Just see here. If I will say that amplitude ratio is how much? So amplitude ratio is sigma maximum minus sigma minimum by 2 upon sigma maximum plus sigma minimum by 2. This 2 will cancel out, and let's take sigma max outside and cancel it also. So this will be 1 minus sigma minimum by sigma maximum upon 1 plus sigma minimum by sigma maximum. From here you can say that, okay, definitely the amplitude ratio can be defined as 1 minus R upon 1 plus R. So this relation also you have to take care of. Fine. Okay, so I don't think that this is required by you. Okay, just see here. On solving this, you will find A to be equal to 1 minus R upon 1 plus R. Fine. Moving further, let's take one previous year. For the given fluctuating load, the values of the stress amplitude and the stress ratio is. Okay, so straight away sigma maximum is provided as 250 megapascal. Sigma minimum is provided as 50 megapascal. Amplitude we know, sigma max minus sigma mean by 2, which will be equal to 250 minus 50 by 2, which will be equal to 100 megapascal. And as far as stress ratio is concerned, this is sigma minimum by sigma maximum. So from here you can say that okay, this will be 50 upon 250, basically 1 by 5, basically 0.20. So from here you can straight away say that okay, the C is the correct option. Fine. Moving further, let's talk about fatigue failure. So every one of you must be knowing that okay, what is the example of fatigue failure. So this is your example of fatigue failure. A wire is there, you want to break it. So one way of breaking it, you have to apply static load, and when this static load will increase the value of, will exceed the value of SYT or SUT, the material will fail. Or else you can go like this also. Fine. You can apply a cyclic load as well. The point is, definitely the amount of stress which is required in order to fail this material using this cyclic load is decreased. This is the point. But more importantly, we have to understand this fact also, that say for example I am applying the cyclic load like this in one way, and in another way I am applying the cyclic load like this. I think this is something which you are able to understand. If everyone has studied the strength of material perfectly, then you must be able to understand that in this case, when I am providing the cyclic load, but in a way where the sigma max is not of great value. Okay. In second case, the amount of stress which must be generating in the material must be greater. So depending upon the stress as well, it will be decided that how many number of cycles. Definitely the amount of stress required or the amount of load required to fail the component will definitely be less. But the point is that how many number of cycles we have to perform corresponding to that particular amount of loading or particular amount of stress cycle. Fine. So that we will come step by step. Right now we are just defining it, that fatigue failure, it is defined as a time delayed failure. Of course we know that as far as static loading is concerned, if this P will exceed the value of SYT, the material will fail, or SUT, the material will fail. But here corresponding to this loading, we have to apply it for some time. We have to see that okay, some number of cycles which have to be performed before the failure. The phenomenon of decreased resistance of the material to the fluctuating stress is the main characteristic of the fatigue failure. Okay, so we all know that okay, this is easier way of getting the material to fail. Fine. So basically the material will fail at a lesser value even lesser than the yield strength. Fine. Now let's understand what how we are going to analyze it. So we have to analyze this fluctuating load, a generalized fatigue loading condition like this. This will be having some sigma max, this will be having some sigma minimum, mean will also be there. But the point is we straight away cannot go like that. Okay, here we have to understand that we have to divide this fluctuating loading condition as a combination of static loading condition plus completely reverse loading condition. Static loading condition means if sigma mean has been applied as a static load on a material, and apart from that a completely reverse load of sigma amplitude has been applied, then the combination of both will be providing us the fluctuating load. In actual we have to design corresponding to this, but straight away we cannot design corresponding to this, so we are using this method. Fine. We already know as far as static is concerned, if the load in the material is greater than SYT or SUT, the material will fail. But here we don't know that how the material is decided, that whether the material is going to fail or not, or in how many number of cycles the material is going to fail or not. Right now we know about this static scenario. We know that corresponding to sigma mean, we can understand that okay, the sigma mean if exceeds the value of SYT, the material will fail. Sigma mean if exceeds the value of SUT, the material will definitely fail. Fine. Provided even there is no amplitude. Okay, so straight away from here you can say. The point is, what about completely reverse loading? How do we design corresponding to completely reverse loading? So this is something which you have to learn from here, or this sigma mean static loading we already know. Fine. So we are talking about completely reverse loading condition. Completely reverse loading condition, considering that this body is having negligible weight of itself, weight is neglected. Okay, whatever load is there, this is coming from the top, corresponding to which the material is either under tension or compression and it is performing a completely reverse loading. Just simply understand that it is performing a, every component, every element of the material is performing the completely reverse loading. Fine. Point A, when at top, is under compression. Point A, when come to the bottom, will come under tension. In the same way, it will happen again and again. Fine. Okay. So this is the scenario. Now the point is, we all know that okay, this cycle is going to fail the material with the help of low amount of maximum stress. But the point is, corresponding to particular cycle, what is the, or you can say corresponding to particular stress generated in the material, what is the number of cycles the material is going to perform before being failed. Here if I will want you to compare this, say for example this is your first case and this is your second case. In the first case, straight away you can say that the amount of maximum stress which is generated in the component is not that high in comparison to the second case. Definitely the first material will fail less than that of SYT, but it will take some number of cycles, say 50 cycles. Okay, if we will increase the deformation such that basically we are concerned only with the stress cycle. So if this sigma amplitude increased, the point having the maximum stress and that maximum stress too is increased, then in that case we are getting only 20 cycles before being failed. Is it fine? Are we getting this? So if sigma 1 is greater than or sigma 2 is greater than sigma 1, if sigma 2 is greater than sigma 1, then definitely N2 is going to be less than N1. This is something we have to take as a core of this particular subject, of this particular topic at least. Fine, sigma 2 must be greater than sigma 1 if N2 is less than N1. Now exactly it is not inversely proportional, exactly it is not like that N is equal to K by sigma, it is not like that. It is like that log N is somewhat 1 by K of, or you can say C upon log sigma, something like that. The point is, here in this case, here when we are talking about a fluctuating load, it is not a single point, single amount of stress corresponding to which the material is failing. This is say sigma 1 and this is say sigma 2. Okay, so material is failing corresponding to sigma 1 also and corresponding to sigma 2 also. It is the number of cycle after which it is failing. Therefore here it is not a single strength, here there are infinite number of strength as far as fatigue loading is concerned. Okay, so endurance strength is going to be defined for a particular material. You can say infinite values of endurance strength will be there. But the point is, corresponding to every endurance strength, there will be number of cycles. That okay, this is my endurance strength, this is my endurance strength, this is the sigma which the material can hold for this particular number of cycle. Fine, this is sigma 1. Sigma 1 is less than sigma 2. Definitely the number of cycle it is going to perform is greater. If sigma 2 is greater, then definitely the number of cycle it is going to perform is less. You have to understand the core of the topic. Okay, so everything what we have to understand is that okay, definitely the amount of stress required to fail the material is decreased, but it will also depend upon the number of cycle. You cannot directly say that okay, the material will fail, as far as fatigue loading is concerned, the material will fail at this 120 megapascal. Straight away you cannot say. You have to tell okay, corresponding to this 120 megapascal, the material will fail after performing this N1 number of cycles. Corresponding to this 240, the material will fail after performing this N2 number of cycles. This is something which you have to understand. If you are straight away saying that okay, this material is failing at 120, straight away it is not defining anything. Okay. Now as far as this SN curve is concerned, let me tell you, this is for steel. This particular whatever we are watching over here, this is for steel. For aluminum also you can get the same kind of relation. Basically N and S will be inversely proportional. If one will increase, the other will be decreased. Here the most important point is that after 10 raised power 6 cycles, it was observed that the graph becomes asymptotic to the horizontal line. Okay, this becomes basically horizontal to the number of cycle axis. And when this becomes horizontal, then we can say that okay, if the material, if say this is S, or this is some sigma corresponding to which the number of cycles was 10 raised power 6. If I will decrease sigma even a bit from this, then the number of cycles the material is going to perform is going to be infinite. So straight away we can say that okay, if the material endurance strength is sigma, and corresponding to the sigma the number of cycles it is performing 10 raised power 6, so we are considering that okay, this is your failure point. Okay, try to understand, the material is failing before that also, the material will fail after that also, but the point is if this sigma is applied, we are considering that the material will not fail because we are considering that it will fail after infinite number of cycles, and for that infinite number of cycles we are not going to calculate it, or we are not going to be there to find it after how many number of cycles it is going to fail. Okay, just if the material has completed its 10 raised power 6 cycles corresponding to a particular sigma, we will say that okay, the material is not going to be fail. Fine. So this is something, this 10 raised power 6 becomes very important. After 10 raised power 6 cycles, we can say that okay, the material is going to perform infinite number of cycles. Fine. So after that, after all these things, we can now discuss the definitions of endurance limit, endurance strength, and fatigue life. Endurance limit is a special kind of endurance strength corresponding to 10 raised power 6 cycle as far as steel is concerned. So here it is defined as the maximum amplitude of a completely reversed. Once again, it is defined only for the completely reversed stress cycle. It is defined as the maximum amplitude of a completely reversed stress cycle that a standard specimen can sustain for unlimited number of cycles. Of course, here also the number of cycles is important. By unlimited in this case, what they mean? It is 10 raised power 6 cycles. Fine. Endurance strength. From standard books, if I am talking about endurance strength, what does endurance strength means? So endurance strength, it is defined as the maximum amplitude of a completely reversed stress cycle that a standard specimen can sustain for the given finite number of cycles. Here you will be having great number of endurance strength. Corresponding to every number of cycles, we will be having a definite amount of endurance strength. Okay, so straight away you cannot say that okay, the material will fail at this particular stress or not. Here it is that corresponding to this number of cycles, this is the endurance strength. Corresponding to this number of cycles, this is the endurance strength. This is something which you have to understand. Okay, now as far as fatigue life is concerned, this is also an important term which you have to tell. We know that it is the number of cycles which will decide that okay, corresponding to this particular stress, when the material is going to fail. So here the fatigue life is defined in terms of number of cycles itself. So number of cycles that a material can withstand before being failed for the given amplitude. Okay, corresponding to particular amplitude, you have to define that this is the fatigue life of this material, or else it is not possible. Okay, and once again it is defined only for the completely reversed loading. So what we are doing basically here, as far as fluctuating load is concerned, we are basically trying to understand everything as far as completely reversed load is concerned. Once we will understand everything, once we will design corresponding to completely reversed loading, then we will be able to design for fluctuating load as well, because there the static part will also come into consideration. Fine. Okay, now if someone will ask me that okay, like SYT and SUT, what do you say? That SE is also SE, which is endurance limit. Okay, considering that material is not going to fail if the sigma is less than this SE, because we know that material is going to fail after infinite number of cycles. Fine. So whether this SE is also material property or not? I'm not talking about endurance strength, I'm talking about endurance limit. It could have been the material property, but it is not. Why it is not a material property? Just see here. Why it is not a material property? Because we know that this is something which is defined corresponding to fluctuating load, completely reverse load, a type of dynamic load. Now in dynamic load, we know that the mechanics of failure depends on the number of notches, on the notches basically. So here number of notches will always be of importance. Here the notches will always be of importance. Here the irregularities will always be of importance. So we cannot neglect them. We cannot straight away say, okay, the endurance limit of this particular steel is this much. No. It will depend upon the size, because the size will decide, okay, how many the number of notches is. Because if the size will increase, the number of notches will increase, and therefore the probability of being failed will also increase. And corresponding to which you can say that, okay, the endurance limit will decrease. Fine. So we have to understand that like SYT or SUT, we cannot define endurance limit as a property. So endurance limit in true sense is not a property of a material like ultimate strength or the yield strength. It get affected by many factors such as surface finish, size, notch sensitivity, etc. Basically, they are dependent upon the notches. What is this SE? SE is the modified endurance limit. Basically, the endurance limit which we will be knowing corresponding to the particular component we are designing for. Okay, so this is modified endurance limit. As far as SE dash is concerned, what is this? This will be defined for standard specimen. Endurance limit for standard specimen. If someone will ask what is Ka, so Ka is a factor. Ka, Kb, Kc, Kd all are factors which are basically less than 1. All the Ks are less than 1. Okay. They basically take care of the material as a factor of safety. Fine. So K is your surface finish factor. If surface finish increases, surface roughness decreases and surface finish increases. Okay, in any way you can say, if surface finish increases, number of notches decreases, probability of being failed decreases, and therefore the endurance limit increases. Okay, so if surface finish will be high, then the value of Ka will also be greater. Of course less than 1, but it will be on the higher side. As far as Kb is concerned, Kb is size factor. If size increases, then number of notches increases. Of course the probability of being failed decreases, therefore we say that okay, endurance limit decreases. Fine. In the same way, Kc is reliability factor. Now it is not like that, more the reliability, more the value of Kc. It is not like that. It is something that everything is decided the way the product has been made, the product has been finished, the product has been made up of a particular material. Everything is decided, the dimension, everything is decided. Now the point is that where we are going to use it. If you want to have its great reliability, it is not the reliability which you will get after using this. It is what reliability you want. So if you want great reliability, okay, say you want 99.99% of the reliability, then that will happen only when this SE will decrease. You are working under some safe value, some safe reason, then only it is possible. So this is something which you should be keeping in mind, that if the reliability is high, say for 50%, the value of Kc is equal to 1, and for 99.99% of the reliability, the value of Kc will decrease. Why? Because when the value of Kc will decrease, then Se will decrease. If Se will decrease, basically you have decreased the working limit, and if you have decreased the working limit, of course your reliability should have increased. Okay, so this Kc is basically equal to 0.69 something, whatever, but basically it will be on the lower side. Fine. So if reliability required is more, then in that case KC is going to be decreased. This is something which you have to understand. After that, KD is there. KD basically, these all factors were taking care of number of notches. Here this factor will take care of your sensitivity with respect to notches. Okay, if one notch is there, how much sensitive you are. So corresponding to that, we are getting this KD. KD is equal to 1 by KF. The more is the value of KF, the less will be the value of KD. Ultimately, the working limit will decrease. We will be working in a safer zone. So that is how we are. We have designed. We will be using these things in our design. As far as gate is concerned, all these whatever we have discussed could be used from theory point of view. Theoretical question can be asked straight away from this particular topic. Just see here. This question was asked previously in gate. Endurance limit of a beam subjected to pure bending decreases with. Now, if the size of the increase in the surface roughness and increase in the size of the beam. What we want to calculate? We want to know the condition when the endurance limit will decrease. So if the surface roughness will increase, definitely the number of notches will increase. And if the number of notches got increased, then definitely the probability of being failed increases, and therefore you can say that SE will decrease. Fine. In the same way, if the size of beam will increase, the number of notches will increase, and if the number of notches increase, the probability of being failed increases, and if the probability of being failed increases, the SE will again decrease. So basically both the part of statement A is perfectly correct. Both of them will ultimately cause this endurance limit to decrease. Fine. Now, as far as numerical point of view is concerned, so till now, as far as fatigue loading was concerned, we have discussed as far as in how many ways in theoretical questions can be asked. Now we will be dealing with the numerical problems which are asked from the fatigue loading. As far as concepts are concerned, we have gone through everything. Now it is only the application of those concepts which we have to understand. Try to understand. As far as fatigue load is there, two ways the questions can be asked. One is SN curve. Every one of you might be knowing this. One is SN curve and another one is your Soderberg, Goodman, Gerber, modified Goodman, etc. Okay. This is the second way of asking the question. You have to keep in mind that whenever you are dealing with a SN curve, then basically you are dealing with a completely reversed stress cycle. I am not talking about endurance, that endurance limit is only associated with the SN curve. It is not. Endurance limit is associated with both. But if I am specifically giving you problem of a SN curve, then definitely I am talking about a completely reversed stress cycle. Fine. If I will be talking about a fluctuating load where there is sigma amplitude as well as sigma mean, then in that case Soderberg, Goodman, Gerber will be asked. Fine. So this is this classification you should be having in your mind in order to understand the things in a more proper way. So this is the actual SN graph for steel. If you will observe it, here it have two portions. One is low cycle fatigue, another one is high cycle fatigue. If someone will ask that, okay, whether we are going to deal with complete cycle or we are going to deal with only high cycle fatigue or only low cycle fatigue, so the answer is it is only the high cycle fatigue from where the question will be asked. Why only the high cycle fatigue? Because we design only in the high cycle fatigue range. Why only high cycle range? Because this is the 1000 cycle which decide that whether the number of cycles is in high cycle range or low cycle range. If 1000 plus, then we are talking about high cycle fatigue. If 1000 minus, then we are talking about low cycle fatigue. The point is, if you will observe this low cycle fatigue, here the working condition is from SUT to 0.9 SUT. Now we should understand that we never go for this particular range from 0.9 SUT. We don't keep our load on the material so that the stress which is generated in the component is in between 0.9 SUT to SUT. This is very unsafe zone. Fine. So we don't straight away, even if we are talking about a static loading, then also we don't go with this amount of stress. So this is not something which in general we apply to a material under dynamic loading condition. Second point is that from 0 to 1000 cycles, if you are talking about only 0 to 1000 cycles, you never design a component which will, as far as apart from the safety components, you never design anything which will be fail in 1000 cycle itself. Okay, so this is something you have to understand, that it is only the high cycle fatigue which we have to deal with more than 10,000. So if I will say that how it will appear like on SN curve, so this will be your SN curve for now. So it will, instead of starting from 0.9 SUT, it will start from log 0.9 SUT, and instead of 0 as far as number of cycles is concerned, it will start from 1000. Okay, so from 1000 and further. Fine. Now still the relation which I have discussed, that as you will increase the number of cycle, as you want to increase the number of cycle, the stress which you can apply, the amplitude of the stress which you can apply on the material will keep on decreasing. So this is the only thing which you have to keep in mind. Apart from that, we should be understanding that okay, what is endurance limit? Apart from endurance strength, what is endurance limit? If this is known to you, then after that there is nothing left with this problem. Okay, you just have to understand that always in this AB, for this AB line, the question will be asked. In n number of ways they can ask the question, but always this straight line, always about this straight line they are discussing. Okay, and if I will say that okay, this is my straight line AB, and I somehow know this x1 y1, I somehow know this x2 y2, and I know the value of x0, can I not calculate the value of y0? Can I calculate or not calculate the value of y0? Yes, I can calculate the y0, because we know that this line AB do have the same slope for AC portion as well as for CB portion. Therefore we can say that whatever slope AB will be having, the same slope AC or CB or AB will be having. Okay, so you have to understand the fact that okay, as far as this AB is concerned, this line is concerned, this straight line is concerned, the slope is not going to change. Fine. Once we are comfortable with this, then after that you can just use the equation of slope and can equate it accordingly, whatever is your requirement. So say y2 minus y1 upon x2 minus x1, this must be equal to y0 minus y1, or you can use y0 minus y2 as well, whatever you are comfortable with, upon x0 minus x1. So this is the relation, which is not something requiring the concept of design. This is straight away a mathematical equation. The point is, whatever knowledge you have gained as far as endurance strength is concerned, endurance limit is concerned, 10⁶ cycle is concerned, low cycle fatigue, high cycle fatigue is concerned, after that you can confidently attend the problem. You can confidently find that okay, what is x1, what is y1 here, what is x0, what is y0 here, what is x2, what is y2 over here. That is the only thing which is required, and therefore we have discussed all this thing. Or else straight away if I will say that okay, somehow this x1 y1 is told to you, x2 y2 is told to you, x0 is told to you, definitely you will be able to calculate the y0, or if y0 is told to you, definitely you will be able to calculate the x0. Fine. Moving further, let's talk about some problems. In this particular case, previous year problem, SN curve for the steel becomes asymptotic. So it becomes asymptotic at 10⁶ cycle, we already know. For aluminum it is not the case. I think it is 10⁹ or 10⁸ cycles. Basically the thing is, it is not mandatory that every cycle get horizontal, every SN curve get horizontal after 10⁶ cycle. This is the property which was shown by steel. Fine. A cylindrical shaft is subjected to an alternating stress of 100 megapascal. Okay. The fatigue strength to sustain the 1000 cycle is 490 megapascal. So sigma which is applied is equal to 100 megapascal. Apart from that, they are talking about situation of 1000 cycle and 490 megapascal. So what we know from our SN curve, that corresponding to 1000 cycle 0.9 SUT is there, but straight away they are telling you the value. Okay, this is 490 megapascal. So corresponding to log 1000, you are having log 490. In the same way, if the character endurance strength, basically the ideally it should be endurance limit, but okay, if number of cycle is not mentioned, we should be able to understand that okay, they must be talking about endurance limit itself. Fine. So here it is 70 megapascal. So this is your 10 to the power 6 cycle, log 10 to the power 6, and this will be your log 70. Now the point which is given to you is this. Y naught is given to you, x naught you have to find. Y naught is how much? Y naught is your, say x naught is x naught. Y naught is how much? Y naught is your log 100 base 10. Fine. So you just have to find this coordinates of 2 points in complete as far as this line AB is concerned. So straight away you can find it with the help of A will be equal to 3 comma 2.69, B is 6 comma 1.845, and this is say x comma x is basically log n base 10, where n is the number of cycles the body has performed. Okay, x comma 2. After that it is very simple. Y2 minus y1 upon x2 minus x1 is equal to y minus y1 upon x minus x1. From here you can say that okay, 2.690 minus 1.845 upon 3 minus 6, this must be equal to 2 minus 1.845 upon x minus 6. On solving this, you will get the value of x to be 5.44. Basically what you got, log n base 10 is came out to be 5.44. From here you can solve it taking the anti-log, this will come out to be, n will come out to be 281,914 cycles. Fine. Okay, so this will be your answer number C. Moving further, if I will talk about the another way in which the questions can be asked, so it is your Goodman line, Soderberg line and Gerber line, which is basically defined for fluctuating loads only, fluctuating loading conditions only. Now as far as fluctuating loading is concerned, we will be having sigma A as well as sigma M. If I am talking about a y-axis where I can say that sigma M is 0. If I am talking about sigma M to be 0, then basically I am talking about a completely reverse stress cycle, and therefore I can straight away say that it is our point of failure. After that, if I will increase the amount of amplitude, the body will fail. In the same way, if I am talking about x-axis where the sigma A is 0, basically I am talking about a static loading condition. We know that these are our points of failure. So by considering that okay, if the sigma mean is 0, then we are talking about completely reverse. If completely sigma amplitude is 0, we are talking about sigma mean only, static only. From there we are finding that okay, these are the points of failure, but just by our common sense. Now the point is that same thing was taken into consideration by n number of scientists, and they have given their own justification, they have done their own experiments, and after that they came to some conclusions. These conclusions was, say, Soderbergh came up with the safety safe area, which was under this green line, and the equation of this straight line was sigma mean upon SYT plus sigma amplitude upon SE must be equal to 1. Fine. In the same way, if I will talk about Goodman, so Goodman come up with sigma mean upon SUT plus sigma amplitude upon SE is equal to 1. In the same way, Gerber also came. These relations you have to keep in mind. Gerber came with sigma mean upon SUT square plus sigma amplitude upon SE is equal to 1. So these are the relations which were provided by different scientists. These relations you have to keep in mind. Okay. Straight away, the straight line equations have been used in order to find this. Ultimately, you have to use the, ultimately you have to remember these formulas. Fine. Now, if I will say factor of safety is also included in the consideration, then in that case, SE will be replaced by SE by factor of safety, and in the same way, SYT will be replaced by SYT upon factor of safety. If I are talking about Soderbergh, in the same way, Goodman and Gerber also, SUT will be considered as SUT upon FOS to be a point of failure. So from here, once again, you can define this. As far as Goodman is concerned, you can say sigma amplitude upon SUT upon factor of safety is equal to sigma mean, plus sigma mean upon SYT upon factor of safety is equal to 1. From here you will get the relation which is equal to sigma A upon SUT plus sigma mean upon SYT is equal to 1 by FOS. For Soderbergh, you can write the relation like sigma A upon SYT plus sigma mean upon SUT, sigma A upon SE SYT is equal to 1 by factor of safety. In the same way, if I will ask about Gerber, then that equation will become sigma A upon, here straight away you will not find the FOS on the right side. Here you should be understanding that okay, sigma A upon SE by factor of safety, keep it like this over here, plus sigma M upon SYT upon factor of safety. So this whole square you have to take, therefore straight away the factor of safety will not come on the right side. This is something which you should be able to understand. Fine. So after taking the factor of safety into consideration, we will be getting these equations. Here you can find the another problem. A thin spherical pressure vessel of 200 mm diameter and 1 mm thickness subjected to the internal pressure varying from, so P maximum, it is not the stress maximum, it is a P maximum which is 8 megapascal, and it is P minimum which is 4 megapascal. From here you can calculate sigma max and sigma minimum for the spherical pressure vessel, which is PD by 40. PD by 4T. From here it will be 8 into 200 by 4, which is 400 megapascal, and the same way sigma minimum will be equal to PD by 40, P minimum by 40, which will be equal to 200 megapascal. From here you can calculate, okay, sigma mean will be equal to 300 megapascal, and the same time sigma amplitude will be equal to 100 megapascal. Once you are done with that, now you can say that okay, as far as Goodman is concerned, we know that sigma amplitude upon SUT plus sigma mean upon sigma amplitude upon SE plus sigma mean upon SUT is equal to 1 by factor of safety. So sigma amplitude is how much? 100 upon SE. SE is how much? 400 plus sigma mean is how much? Sigma mean is 300 upon sigma amplitude is how much? Sorry, SUT is how much? 800. From here you can calculate the factor of safety. This will come out to be, factor of safety will come out to be 1.6 from here. Fine. Okay, so let's take the last portion, a modified Goodman. Modified Goodman was considered to be having the more safer reason in comparison to Goodman. Here in Goodman, he has considered okay, under SUT the safety is there, but after modified Goodman you can find that okay, from SYD to SUT also they are giving some safety. Okay, they are not considering this portion also in your safety reason. So basically what we have to understand as far as gate point of view is concerned, that it will be the combination of yield line and your Goodman line which will provide us the final result. So yield line provides us, yield line equation is sigma mean upon SYD plus sigma amplitude upon SYT is equal to 1, and Goodman already we know. So using these two equations we have to find that what will be our safety dimension, what will be our factor of safety. The point from here you should be taking is that, say for example, using yield line you have got that the dimension, the area, the cross section, whatever, from yield line you have got that it came out to be 1000 meter. Your dimension should be 1000 meter. Okay, particular dimension which is there, which is performing its role in the failure, is 1000 meter. And say Goodman is saying that this could be 600 meter, 600 meter, 600 mm, whatever it is, 600 mm square, 1000 mm square, whatever it is. The point is that what answer you have to say if you are getting area different from both the lines, then as far as dimension is concerned you have to tell the maximum value. Now someone can ask me that, sir, how we are deciding it? This is deciding on the moral basis. This is deciding on the basis of considering that factor of safety is of prime importance. Factor of safety is of prime importance. If you will say that okay, my component can sustain your this amount of load even if the dimension is 600 meter, then at first it feels like that okay, this design is good design. But the point is that according to another part it was 1000 meter also, and therefore even when you are taking greater amount of product, okay, large amount of product, even when that is not economically sound, economically good, economically satisfying. But the point is that from safety point of view it is always suggested that you have to answer the larger area. Fine. In the same way, if you are getting the value of say factor of safety, this was area, so area you have to take maximum, area, dimension, whatever, okay, you have to take maximum. And if I will say that what about factor of safety, say factor of safety you have calculated corresponding to every given data, factor of safety you have calculated to be a particular value. Now factor of safety came out to be 1.5 from yield line, and factor of safety as per Goodman came out to be 2. Now what will be your answer? So it should be minimum of the two. It should be minimum of the two. Once again the same thing, if you are going to say that okay, I have designed something which is having the factor of safety 2, then it feels like that is good. But if that will be informed in the other peoples as well, to the consumer, to the basically manufacturer, then they will have this confidence that okay, the factor of safety is 2, we can work accordingly. But the point is, from other part of the design, it was coming out to be 1.5. So you have to tell the minimum value, even when it doesn't seem that okay, you have designed something having very great economical advantage. So if you are getting 2 areas from both the lines, the maximum you have to tell. If you are getting 2 factor of safety from both the lines, then minimum you have to tell. So this is something which you have to understand. Fine. So let us take this last question. A bar is subjected to the combination of a steady load of 60 kN and a load fluctuating between -10 and 90 kN. The corrected endurance limit of the bar is 150 megapascal. The yield strength of the material is 480 megapascal. The ultimate strength of the material is 600 megapascal. The cross section is square with the side A. If the factor of safety is 2, the value of A according to the modified Goodman criteria is. Now according to modified Goodman criteria, we have to go for yield line as well as Goodman line. First of all, our objective is to determine that what will be the value of P maximum and P minimum. So P maximum can be calculated as 60 plus 90, so it will be 150 kilonewton. In the same way, if I will say that what is the value of P minimum, so it will be 60 plus minus 10, which will be 50 kilonewton. From here you can calculate P mean. So P mean will be equal to 100 kilonewton, and therefore P amplitude will be equal to, this is load, this is in terms of load, this will be equal to 50 kilonewton. Okay, say we are talking about a square of cross section side A. So the area will be A square, and from there we can calculate that okay, what will be the sigma mean. So sigma mean will be 100 upon 100,000 upon A square. This is my sigma mean, and sigma mean upon S UT as far as Goodman is concerned, okay, which is provided as 600 megapascal plus 50,000 upon A square upon what is the value of SYT? SYT is basically 150, sorry, SC basically 150 megapascal. This is equal to 1 by 2. From here, if you will solve that, then this will come out to be so basically A square came out to be 1000. From here you can find A will come out to be 31.62 mm. Fine. If I will use yield line, this was from Goodman. If I will use yield line, then in that case I will be using sigma mean by SYT, which is 480 plus sigma amplitude by SYT is equal to 1 by 2. From here you can get A square to be 625. From there A will come out to be 25 mm. The point is, from both you are getting the different value of dimension. So whether we will be going for 31.62 or 25, it will be decided upon which of the two is greater. The greater will be more safer, and therefore we will be answering this to be 31.62 from safety point of view. So this is our answer, 31.62. Okay, so that is it as far as fluctuating load is concerned. We have covered each and every possible variations. We have covered each and every possible ways in which the question can be asked. I think if you feel like that this session is useful to you, please do like, share and subscribe, and stay tuned with the GATE Academy for further such videos. Thank you.